Why do avoidants even date? Why do they date at all? They fear emotional intimacy. They fear losing their independence to somebody in a relationship. They push away healthy partners and run from healthy relationships and completely self-sabotage. So why do they even go through it? Why do they put other people through it? Why do they date at all? Well, to understand why, one first has to understand that avoidants avoid. The way that they've learned to manage and cope with emotional and relationship stress is to not deal with it. It's to run from it, to not process emotions, to not handle problems, to stick their head in the sand like an ostrich. And part of this includes self-reflection. Severe avoidants do not self-reflect because self-reflection is the polar opposite of avoiding. When you self-reflect, you have to actually process your feelings, face your fears, take accountability, see where you've gone right, where you've gone wrong, reflect on how your behavior impacts others. That's painful stuff, and avoidants don't like to process painful stuff. So, they often do not self-reflect, which means that they are not even aware of why they behave the way they do. They are not even fully aware that they are the problem. They'll convince themselves that they keep on just not finding the right person because when their fears are triggered, they don't reflect on it and they have to tell themselves something. So they'll tell themselves, why can't I find the right person? This must be the wrong person. Deep down, they do actually long for connection. They want to be loved. They don't want to be alone. But then when they get exactly what they're looking for, they deactivate, they shut down, they take their emotions and stuff them. And this includes any self-reflection over the situation. So they will go through this cycle of wanting intimacy when they get it, running from it, wanting intimacy when they get it, running from it. Also, severe avoidants do not know how to internally validate themselves. They rely on external validation to feel better about themselves. This really goes back to childhood. They were emotionally neglected. They were not allowed to express their emotions. And the only time that they got any affection or love was typically when they achieved something. So they learned to rely on that external validation. And they seek that in dating. They get that affection, they get that attention, they get to feel wanted, especially early in the relationship when there's no threat of emotional intimacy because you barely know the person and there's no commitment. So that feels safe. In the avoidant's mind, because they don't reflect and process things, they think that that dopamine rush of the early relationship stage, the honeymoon stage, is how a relationship is supposed to be across the board. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how it's supposed to stay. And then when they get their fears triggered, they don't know what these fears stem from. They just feel this paralyzing fear. They avoid reflecting on it and convince themselves that it's the other person that's the problem. And they just think they have bad luck and they just can't seem to find the right person. The funny thing is that healthy relationships are precisely what trigger this fear. Unhealthy relationships, toxic partners, do not trigger the avoidance fears because they don't fear being abandoned by somebody who's not all that special. And they don't fear a toxic partner because there's no threat of emotional intimacy there. So they'll find themselves committing to toxic partners, having long-term relationship with those, and every time a healthy, loving, emotionally available partner comes along, they will self-sabotage that. But all the while just asking themselves, why can't I find the right person? So the lack of self-reflection is really why they keep going out into the dating pool and hurting person after person after person, because they are really truly unaware to most degrees of their own behavior, that they are in fact the problem. And they need that external validation. They need to feel wanted. They need to feel desired to make themselves feel better about themselves. Plus, the dopamine rush that comes early in the relationship, in the honeymoon phase, helps numb any painful emotions that they don't want to process. So severe avoidants are so wrapped up and focused in their own perceived wants and needs that they fail to self-reflect and actually realize that this behavior is very hurtful, and they leave a ton of heartbreak in their wake. They're unaware of it because they choose to stay unaware of it because they choose to not self-reflect. It all comes down to the lack of self-reflection and the desire for external validation. That's why there are so many avoidants out there in the dating pool. And if you even go on to dating apps, there is a higher percentage of avoidants there than there are in regular life if you met someone organically. There's a lot of them out there. And they often tend to be serial daters for all the reasons we discussed, because their avoidant attachment prevents them from actually maintaining a long-term healthy relationship.